The planet Vera had always been a place of peace. Its blue skies, green plains, and gentle rivers made it feel like a home untouched by war. For decades, humans and aliens alike had lived together under the protection of the United Galactic Council. Traders moved freely between cities. Children played in parks, and the hum of life was constant. But all that peace shattered one morning. From the horizon, massive shadows appeared, shapes that blotting out the rising sun. The Zorgath Armada had come. Towering warships moved like predators, their dark hulls gleaming with alien technology, designed for only one purpose: destruction. Alarms rang across every city as their fighters swarmed into the atmosphere, shooting beams of energy that carved through the skies. The streets erupted in chaos. Buildings burned, bridges collapsed, and the cries of terrified civilians filled the air. Smoke rose in great clouds, mixing with the bright streaks of laser fire. Commander Lyra Kale stood on the bridge of Vera's central defense station, her hands gripping the rail. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had faced dangerous missions before, but nothing like this. Through the large viewport, she could see entire squadrons of council ships being torn apart. Explosions lit the night, each one a cruel reminder that help had not yet arrived. She whispered to herself, "We might not make it." Her lieutenant, Jaren, came running to her side, his face pale and eyes wide. "Commander, the civilians, they're trapped. There's no way to get them all out," he shouted over the blaring alarms. Lyra turned to him, her face tense but determined. "We do what we can, Jaren. We can't save everyone, but we will save as many as possible. That's all we can do." Outside, families ran blindly through the streets. Mothers carried children. Fathers dragged the elderly, and everyone stumbled over the rubble of destroyed buildings. Their fear was palpable, a heavy weight pressing on the hearts of those still fighting. Lyra's team moved quickly, directing squads to protect key areas and evacuate the wounded. Even as explosions shook the station, she refused to show panic. Every second counted. A sudden explosion rocked the bridge. Sparks flew, consoles sparked, and an energy shield flickered. Lyra steadied herself. She knew the council fleet had promised reinforcements, but their promise felt like a cruel joke now. Every channel she tried was silent. "No one is coming," she said quietly, more to herself than to Jaren. Jaren swallowed hard. Then we fight alone?" Lyra's eyes scanned the destruction outside. Fires burned across the city like rivers of molten light, smoke hiding the horizon. Civilians screamed for help, and soldiers shouted as they tried to hold the enemy back, her hands clenched into fists. "Yes," she said firmly, "we fight, and we survive, no matter what." As the enemy pressed closer, a young child ran into the corridor, alone, crying. Lyra knelt and picked him up, holding him close. "You'll be safe," she whispered, even though she didn't know if it was true. The boy clung to her, his tiny arms wrapped around her neck. Jaren joined them, helping guide other survivors to the shelters. Lyra took a deep breath, looking through the smoke and flames. She could see the odds, the destruction, the hopelessness, but she also saw courage. Soldiers refused to give up, civilians helped each other, and somehow, in the chaos, people still ran toward each other instead of away. Lyra whispered to herself, her voice steady despite the fear. "Even if no one else comes, we will not give up." And in that moment, as the fires burned and the screams echoed, a small spark of hope flickered in her heart. It was fragile, almost invisible, but it was there. Somewhere in the dark skies above, something would change the fate of Vera. Something, or someone would arrive. Until then they had only themselves, and that was enough. For now. The streets of Vera had turned into chaos. Smoke and fire filled the air, and the once peaceful city now looked like a battlefield from a nightmare. Civilians screamed as they ran, tripping over debris, carrying loved ones or dragging what few possessions they could save. Buildings groaned and crumbled under the relentless bombardment of the Zorgath Armada. The sky was streaked with fiery trails of incoming missiles and energy blasts that lit up the darkness with frightening beauty. Commander Lyra Kale moved swiftly through the command center, issuing orders as alarms blared around her. The station shook under the repeated hits of enemy fire, but she refused to step back. Every console, every radar, every soldier under her command depended on her focus and clarity. She could see the attackers' formations moving with brutal precision, cutting off evacuation routes and targeting shelters. The Zorgath did not hesitate. They had come to destroy everything. "Commander!" Jaren shouted, pointing to a nearby district. "The civilians trapped near the energy plant, they can't escape on their own. If we don't act, they'll die." Lyra didn't hesitate. "Assemble a squad. Move now. I want those people safe, no matter the cost." Her voice was firm, though the fear behind it was real. The corridors shook with another blast. Sparks fell from the ceiling and alarms screamed in the background, but the team rushed forward, guided by Lyra's resolve. Outside, the scene was even worse. Zorgath fighters darted through the skies like venomous snakes, their energy beams cutting through streets and rooftops. Families huddled in ruined buildings, shaking and crying. A mother clutched her child as the wall beside them collapsed, and a father dragged his injured wife across broken pavement. Every second was a race against death. Lyra's squad fought through the chaos, their boots pounding the debris-strewn streets. Soldiers dodged enemy fire, shielding civilians as they ran. One young recruit fell, screaming as energy beams scorched near him, but comrades pulled him up and kept moving. Each rescue was a small victory against the overwhelming odds, yet the losses piled higher with every passing minute. Jaren stayed close to Lyra, guiding the frightened civilians. "How many more can we save?" he asked, his voice shaking. Lyra's gaze swept across the burning city. The answer was unclear. "As many as we can," she said firmly. "Even one life matters. We don't give up on anyone." A sharp explosion rocked the energy plant. Fires erupted, sending plumes of smoke high into the sky. Civilians screamed as falling debris scattered the streets. Lyra ran toward the danger without hesitation, carrying the youngest children herself while directing soldiers to shield the others. She could feel the heat on her face, smell the smoke and ash filling her lungs, but she pushed forward. Time seemed endless. Every step brought more fear, more destruction, but also more determination. Civilians who were initially frozen by terror now moved, guided by the courage of the soldiers. They formed small lines, helping each other, holding hands and following Lyra and Jaren through the wreckage. Hope, fragile but alive, began to grow among them. Yet even as some were saved, others fell. A man tripped over a piece of rubble and was crushed by a collapsing wall. Children cried for their parents. Families screamed in desperation. The weight of it pressed down on Lyra's heart, threatening to break her, but she clenched her teeth and carried on. She paused for a brief moment, looking at the terrified faces around her, and whispered, "We cannot let them win, not today, not ever." The chaos continued. But Lyra's squad fought with unyielding courage, guiding the survivors toward safety. Every rescue was a defiance, a small victory in a war that seemed hopeless. Even as the city burned and the Zorgath's shadow darkened, the skies, a spark of resilience remained, a spark that refused to be snuffed out. Somewhere beyond the smoke and fire, Lyra felt it, a tiny glimmer of hope, fragile and uncertain. It was as though the universe itself might still have a plan for them. Night had fallen over Vera, but it brought no comfort. The city was a shadow of its former self, blackened by fire and littered with rubble. Streets that once echoed with laughter and life now carried only the sound of distant explosions, moans of the injured, and the whisper of wind through destroyed buildings. Smoke hung thick in the air, stinging eyes and choking lungs. The survivors huddled in shelters, their faces pale and haunted, unsure if the dawn would ever come. Commander Lyra Kale moved through one of the larger shelters, checking on the civilians. She saw families squeezed together in fear, holding each other tightly. Some children were too frightened to speak, while others sobbed quietly into the arms of their parents. Older citizens whispered prayers they barely remembered, hoping for a miracle that seemed impossible. Lyra's own hands shook, slightly as she passed out water and blankets, trying to offer some comfort. Lieutenant Jaren approached her, his face drawn and tired. "Commander, do you really think anyone is coming to help us?" His voice was almost a whisper, as if saying it too loudly might make the question impossible to answer. Lyra looked at him, then at the frightened faces around them. She felt the weight of hopelessness pressing down on her, but she could not show it. Not now. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "But we can't stop fighting. We survive together, or we don't survive at all." The silence was broken by a distant rumble, a sound that could have been another explosion, or perhaps the enemy moving into position. Everyone tensed. Even the children pressed closer to their parents, their wide eyes reflecting fear and uncertainty. Lyra held her breath, scanning the horizon through broken windows. Every second seemed longer than the last. As the night deepened, stories of courage began to spread among the shelters. A small group of survivors, guided others through a collapsing street, saving lives at great risk. Soldiers had held off the enemy long enough for families to escape. Even in despair, small acts of bravery flickered like tiny stars in the darkness. Lyra felt a quiet pride. Humanity, so fragile yet so strong, refused to surrender. Hours passed. The fires in the city burned themselves low, leaving only glowing embers that cast eerie shadows. Lyra found herself outside for a moment, staring at the scarred skyline. The council fleet had failed them. Reinforcements had not arrived. She could almost hear the galaxy mocking them, telling them they were alone. Her heart ached with the weight of loss, but a tiny voice inside whispered, "Do not give up yet." Then something changed. A faint glimmer appeared in the distance, a point of light moving slowly but steadily across the horizon. At first, Lyra thought it was a trick of the smoke and fire, or perhaps another assault. But it was different. It was deliberate, steady, and impossible to ignore. Jaren noticed it too and gasped, "Commander, look!" His voice trembled with disbelief. Lyra's eyes widened. The light grew larger, resolving into a shape that no one could have expected. It was not another council ship, not another alien fleet. It was something new, something familiar in a way that felt like hope itself. A massive human warship. Its hull gleamed even in the firelit sky, and a symbol on its side glowed with quiet authority: Earth. The survivors emerged from their shelters slowly, shielding their eyes from the brilliance of the ship. Murmurs ran through the crowd, disbelief, hope, and wonder mixing in equal measure. Lyra felt her chest tighten, a mixture of relief and cautious joy. Could it really be them? Humans? In this moment, with the city broken and hope nearly gone, the impossible had appeared. Lyra whispered under her breath, barely daring to believe, Maybe we're not alone after all." And somewhere beyond the burning horizon, the first signs of salvation had begun to shine. The faint glimmer that had caught their attention moments ago grew brighter, moving steadily across Vera's scorched skies. Civilians pressed against broken walls and shattered streets, shielding their eyes from the brilliance of what was coming. Lyra Kale stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding. The impossible had arrived. It was not a council fleet. It was not an alien envoy. It was a single massive warship, unlike any technology the galaxy had seen before. Sleek, powerful, and unyielding, its hull gleamed even against the smoke and fire of the city below. Across its side was the unmistakable symbol of humanity, the blue and white globe of Earth. The survivors could hardly believe their eyes. Murmurs ran through the shelters, rising in pitch and hope as they realized what it meant. Children pointed and gasped. Parents held each other tightly, and soldiers who had been fighting desperately finally allowed themselves to breathe. Lyra activated the station's comm system. Her voice shook with a mixture of disbelief and hope. "Identify yourself, are you... help?" A calm, confident voice responded, cutting through the static and chaos. "This is the USS Resolute Human Defense Fleet. You are not alone. We are here." The words echoed through the streets and shelters, carrying a weight that no one could ignore. For the first time in days, the people of Vera dared to hope. The fear that had hung over them like a shadow began to lift, replaced with a cautious optimism. Lyra's mind raced. The humans, so far away, so distant in the galaxy, had come. They had not sent diplomats or advisors. They had come themselves, fully armed, fully prepared, and ready to fight. It was impossible not to feel awe. She turned to Jaren, whose eyes were wide with wonder. "Do you see that?" she whispered. He nodded, his voice catching. They actually came. The USS Resolute hovered above the city like a guardian, its massive silhouette casting a shadow that was both imposing and protective. From its bays, small fighter ships deployed, moving with precision to intercept the enemy before they could strike again. The Zorgath, confident in their victory, faltered as human fighters swarmed them from unexpected directions. Energy beams cut through the night sky, striking with speed and accuracy that seemed almost magical. Lyra felt a surge of emotion she could not contain. She had fought, survived, and led her people through unimaginable terror. But this was more than she had ever hoped for. Humans, with their courage and technology, had arrived at the moment when all hope seemed lost. Across the city, civilians slowly emerged, their fear replaced by awe. Children ran toward open areas, pointing at the sky. Families held hands, whispering prayers of thanks. Soldiers lifted their heads, inspired by the presence of allies who refused to let the city fall. Lyra moved to coordinate with the humans, her voice steady over the comm. "We have civilians trapped near the Eastern District. Can you assist?" A human pilot's voice answered without hesitation. "Consider it done. Keep them alive. We'll handle the rest." Even as the enemy regrouped, trying to strike back, they could not match the precision and power of the humans. Each attack was met with calculated countermeasures, and for the first time, the tide of battle began to turn. Lyra felt tears welling in her eyes. The hopelessness that had weighed on them for days was breaking apart. She looked at the survivors around her, the brave soldiers, the frightened children, the exhausted families, and realized something profound. Humanity had arrived not just to fight, but to inspire. Somewhere above them, the USS Resolute shone like a beacon of hope, a promise that no matter how dark the galaxy became, courage, determination, and unity could change everything. Lyra whispered to herself, her voice trembling with relief and wonder. "We're not alone. Not anymore." And in that moment, with the human warship dominating the skies, Vera and everyone who lived there finally dared to believe in survival again. The sky over Vera was alive with streaks of light, the sound of engines, and the roar of energy, weapons. The Zorgath Armada, once confident in their easy victory, now faced something they had not expected. The humans had arrived, and they came not to negotiate, but to fight, and to save lives. Commander Lyra Kale stood on the bridge, her heart racing as she watched the battle unfold. The USS Resolute moved with unmatched precision, sending fighter squadrons into the heart of the enemy formation. Energy beams cut through the dark sky, striking enemy ships with deadly accuracy. Explosions rocked the atmosphere as alien warships disintegrated under the human assault. Jaren, standing beside her, could hardly believe what he was seeing. "Commander, they're incredible. They move like one mind. Every strike counts." His voice trembled with awe. Lyra nodded, her eyes fixed on the unfolding chaos. "They fight with purpose. They protect civilians. They do not give up. This is what makes them different." The humans did more than just fight. They coordinated rescues, guiding trapped civilians to safety even while the battle raged above. Hover pods descended to pick up families from the streets, while soldiers on the ground created protective corridors through the wreckage. Civilians, who had been paralyzed by fear, now found courage, following human directions and moving steadily toward safety. Lyra could not help but be inspired. She had led her people through the worst days of their lives, but even she had never seen hope take such a tangible form. Humans, with their courage and determination, had become a living shield, protecting Vera when all seemed lost. The Zorgath were taken aback. Their arrogance had convinced them that the Council's scattered forces were the only resistance they would face. But the humans, bold and relentless, shattered that belief. Every attack that had once terrified the city was now countered with precision. Alien fighters that had swarmed fearlessly now hesitated, and even the largest warships faltered under coordinated human strikes. Lyra keyed her comm to the Resolute. "We have civilians trapped near the Eastern District. Can you assist?" A calm, confident voice answered. "Consider it done. Keep them alive. We'll handle the rest." Moments later, a squad of human pilots descended, creating a path through the chaos. Children and parents emerged from hiding following their guidance, moving as if fear had been replaced by trust. Soldiers cheered quietly, inspired by the unwavering human presence. For the first time in days, the people of Vera felt they could survive. Lyra felt tears welling in her eyes. This was more than a battle. It was a turning point. Humanity had not only arrived to fight but to inspire. They showed what it meant to protect those who could not protect themselves, to fight against impossible odds with courage and heart. The battle raged on, but the tide was turning. The Zorgath, unable to anticipate human tactics, began to retreat in disorder. Explosions lit the skies, but this time the humans were in control. Lyra's heart soared as she watched enemy ships fall and civilians continue to escape, guided by the resolute courage of the human fleet. Even in the midst of chaos, Lyra found herself smiling. She had fought for her people, and now, thanks to the humans, their lives could be saved. The fire of hope, nearly extinguished in the darkest hours, now blazed brightly in the hearts of all who survived. Jaren looked at her, awestruck. They really changed everything, didn't they?" Lyra nodded, voice steady but full of emotion. "Yes. Today, they did. Today, hope arrived in the form of humans, and the galaxy will never forget it." Above them, the USS Resolute glided across the skies like a beacon of courage, leaving the Zorgath in disarray and the survivors in awe. Vera had been saved. Not by the distant council, but by the determination, strength, and heart of one human warship and its crew. The fires over Vera were slowly dying, but the battle was far from over. The skies, once a sea of explosions and chaos, now had streaks of precision fire from the human fleet. The Zorgath, once confident and ruthless, were now scattered and disorganized. Their attacks had lost the perfect coordination they once relied upon, and for the first time, the citizens of Vera saw hope that they might survive this nightmare. Commander Lyra Kale moved through the city streets with renewed determination. Civilians followed closely, some holding children, others carrying the wounded. Smoke still stung her eyes and rubble threatened every step, but the presence of the humans above gave her courage she hadn't felt in days. Every time she saw a human fighter swoop down to protect a family or block an attack, her heart leapt with gratitude and awe. Lieutenant Jaren ran beside her, trying to keep the frightened crowd organized. "Commander, look. They're actually driving the enemy back," he shouted over the roar of engines and distant explosions. Lyra nodded, focusing on the human pilots coordinating with her team. "They fight not only with strength but with strategy," she said. "Every move is calculated, every life protected. That's why they're different." Above, Captain Mara Kess of the USS Resolute guided her squad with calm authority. Her voice rang through the comm system, precise and unwavering. "Push the enemy toward the open sectors. Civilians are priority one. Keep them alive no matter what." Lyra relayed the instructions to her soldiers, who pushed forward with a renewed sense of purpose. Civilians moved confidently under their protection, following paths cleared by human and Veran forces working together. Even those who had trembled in fear now walked with steadier steps, emboldened by the humans' presence. The Zorgath, shocked by the humans' efficiency and bravery, began to retreat. Their massive ships tried to regroup, but the humans anticipated every move. Energy beams tore through their formations, and smaller fighter squadrons cut off escape routes. Chaos and confusion replaced the arrogance they had carried into battle. Lyra watched from the command station as one human fighter swooped low to block a collapsing bridge, allowing a group of civilians to escape just in time. Tears pricked her eyes. For days she had carried the weight of hopelessness on her shoulders, watching her people suffer. Now she saw courage and determination save lives in ways she had only dreamed of. Jaren looked around at the survivors who had followed them through the ruins. Children laughed quietly, parents whispered words of relief, and soldiers lifted their heads, renewed with purpose. "They've given us hope," he said softly. Lyra smiled, though her heart remained heavy with the losses they had endured. "Yes, Jaren, and today, hope is stronger than fear. Today we fight back together." As the humans and Varen defenders coordinated, the last Zorgath ships were pushed beyond the planet's orbit. The city, though battered, was no longer under immediate threat. Families emerged from shelters, tears streaming down their faces, hugging loved ones, whispering prayers of thanks to the stars. The courage of one human warship had turned the tide of a battle that had seemed hopeless. Lyra stood on a ruined building, looking toward the horizon, where the USS Resolute hovered majestically. She felt a mixture of awe, relief, and inspiration. Humanity had not only fought for them, they had taught them that even in the darkest hours, courage and unity could triumph. Captain Kess spoke through the comm one last time, her voice calm but filled with pride. "Vera is safe. The enemy has been repelled. Remember this day. Remember that no one is ever truly alone. Humanity does not abandon those in need." Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she turned to the survivors around her. "We will remember," she said softly. "We will never forget." Today, hope returned to Vera, and it came on the wings of humans. Above them, the sky slowly cleared, the fires dying, and the city began to breathe again. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary: courage, heart, and the arrival of a force that refused to let fear rule. The battle was over. The skies of Vera, once filled with fire and smoke, had cleared. The ruins of the city glowed softly in the aftermath of destruction, and the cries of fear had been replaced by quiet murmurs of relief. Civilians wandered the streets holding children, finding loved ones, and helping the injured. The survivors looked up to the heavens, their hearts still racing with disbelief and gratitude. Commander Lyra Kale walked among them, exhausted, but proud. Her uniform was scorched, her face smeared with ash and sweat, but her spirit was unbroken. She saw children laughing for the first time in days, soldiers tending to the wounded with renewed hope, and families embracing tightly. In every corner of the city she could feel the change, the shift from despair to hope, from fear to courage. Lieutenant Jaren approached, his face tired but bright with emotion. "Commander, they did it. They really did it." Lyra smiled, faintly, tears stinging her eyes. "Yes, Jaren. And they didn't just fight for us, and they taught us something we'll never forget. Courage, determination, hope. They reminded us that no one is ever truly alone." Above the city, the USS Resolute hovered silently. The massive human warship had saved Vera when all seemed lost, and now it stood as a symbol of strength, protection, and resilience. Its crew had fought with skill, bravery, and heart, ensuring that not a single life was taken unnecessarily. Civilians looked up in awe, whispering stories to each other of the humans who had arrived from the stars to save them. Captain Mara Kess appeared on the city's communication screens, her calm face framed by the soft glow of her ship's lights. "Vera is safe. You have survived because you did not give up, and because courage finds allies in unexpected places. Humanity believes in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Remember this day, for it is proof that hope can arrive even in the darkest hour." Lyra's heart swelled. She knew that these words would travel far beyond the ruins of Vera. The galaxy would speak of humans in awe, not just for their strength, but for their heart, for their refusal to abandon others in need. She walked to the edge of a destroyed plaza and looked out at the surviving city. The flames of fear had been extinguished, replaced by a new light, the light of hope, unity, and resilience. The people of Vera were battered but alive, inspired to rebuild, to live, and to believe that life could be beautiful again. Jaren stood beside her, watching children run through the rubble, soldiers sharing smiles with rescued families. "Commander, do you think they'll ever return?" he asked quietly. Lyra shook her head gently, her eyes still on the sky. "Perhaps. Perhaps not. But we won't need them to be here forever. They showed us something stronger than their ships and their weapons. They showed us what courage and determination truly look like. That is a legacy that will stay with us always." The humans gave a final salute from the USS Resolute before departing, slipping silently into the stars as if they had never been there, leaving behind a planet that would forever remember their arrival. Civilians and soldiers alike stood in silence, staring at the sky, their hearts full of gratitude and wonder. Lyra turned back to the city, her voice soft but full of conviction. "Today we survived because help came when we needed it most. But more importantly, we learned that courage never dies. Humanity has reminded us all that no one is truly alone, and that even the smallest spark of hope can change everything." And the first light of dawn touched the ruins of Vera, painting the sky with soft gold and orange hues. The survivors felt a new beginning. The scars of battle would remain, but so too would the memory of a human warship that had appeared when all seemed lost, and the legacy of bravery, heart, and hope that it had left behind. And somewhere, in the hearts of all who witnessed it, a quiet truth took hold. Humanity was a force that the galaxy would never forget.